Good evening, I'm Jim Lara. On the NewsHour tonight, the news of this Monday, then the latest on why and what next for the financial rescue plan that was defeated in the House today. The first of 3 presidential campaign reports from the battleground named Florida. The details of appointing a special prosecutor to investigate the firings of 9 U.S. attorneys, as reported by Ari Shapiro of National Public Radio. And in tribute to the art and legacy of the late Paul Newman, a scene from the movie Cool Hand Luke.
Major funding for the NewsHour with Jim Lara is provided by...
The world is changing, and how we use energy today cannot be how we use it tomorrow. There is no one solution. It's not simply more oil, more renewables, or being more efficient. It's all of it. Our way of life depends on developing all forms of energy and to use less of it. It's time to put our differences aside. Will you be part of the solution? Chevron, human energy.
Pacific Life. Vestas.
And the National Science Foundation, supporting education and research across all fields of science and engineering.
And with the ongoing support of these institutions and foundations. And
this program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
The massive financial rescue plan hit a major roadblock in Congress today, and that sent Wall Street into a free fall. The $700 billion bill was defeated in a vote of the U.S. House of Representatives. Republican leader John Boehner accused House Speaker Pelosi of injecting partisan politics into the process at the last minute. Pelosi denied that, and she said the jam-up could only be resolved with a bipartisan effort. At the White House, President Bush expressed disappointment.
We put forth a plan that was big because we got a big problem. I'm going to be talking to my economic advisors after my meeting here with the President, and we'll be working with members of Congress, leaders of Congress on the way forward. Our strategy is to continue to address this economic situation head-on, and we'll be working to develop a strategy that will enable us to continue to move forward.
Treasury Secretary Paulson met with the President after the House vote. He pledged to work with federal regulators to protect the financial markets. But stocks on Wall Street plunged even before the House action. The Dow Jones Industrial Average suffered its largest point drop ever in a single day. It closed down more than 777 points at 10,365. And the NASDAQ fell nearly 200 points to close at 1983. We'll have more on the financial rescue story right after this news summary. Earlier in the day, market jitters cascaded through Asia and Europe. On news, several European banks needed government bailouts. Belgium, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands announced plans to bail out the banking and insurance giant Fortis. And in Britain, the government nationalized the mortgage lender Bradford and Bingley. We have a report from Faisal Islam of Independent Television News.
Bradford and Bingley's headquarters in West Yorkshire is today government property. 3,000 staff feeling uncertain about the future.
The majority of people affected here aren't big-time bankers. You know, many people working here are on less than the national average wage.
On Saturday, after a collapse in its share price, the first signs of deposits being withdrawn, a crucial downgrade of its credit rating and dwindling buyer interest, the bank regulator struck preemptively. BNB no longer passed its key tests for fitness as a deposit taker, despite being relatively well capitalised. Nearly 200 branches and £20 billion in savings deposits will be sold to the Spanish giant Santander for £612 million. Bank shares tumbled in Britain today as it emerged that they would pick up a total bill for interest alone of £500 million annually. But this was also driven by one of the blackest ever days in history for banks across the world. Across Europe, large financial institutions struggled with their funding in torrid credit conditions. Fortis has been saved by the Belgian, Dutch and Luxembourg governments, injecting £9 billion into the group. The German lender, Hypo Real Estate, will receive £27 billion in state support. The Franco-Belgian financial group, Dexia, saw its share price drop by a third until both governments said they were ready to stand behind it. And Iceland's number 3 bank, Glitnir, was effectively nationalised as the government today took a 75% stake in the group.
Back in the U.S., Citigroup agreed today to buy out Wachovia's banking operations. Federal regulators brokered the deal, which will cost Citigroup $2.1 billion. Wachovia's problems were triggered by the troubled mortgage market. In the presidential campaign today, both candidates urged Congress to keep working on the financial rescue plan. In West Des Moines, Iowa, Republican John McCain said the legislation wasn't perfect, but the crisis needed action.
Now is not the time to fix the blame. It's time to fix the problem. I would hope that all our leaders, all of them, can put aside short-term political goals and do what's in the best interest of the American people.
In Westminster, Colorado, Democrat Barack Obama said he was still hopeful Congress would eventually approve the bailout, but in the meantime, he urged patience.
There are going to be some bumps and the trials and tribulations and ups and downs before we get this rescue package done. It's important for the American public and for the markets to stay calm because things are never smooth in Congress, and to understand that it will get done.
Both candidates plan to return to Washington whenever the Senate votes on the rescue legislation. A special prosecutor will investigate the firings of 9 U.S. attorneys. Attorney General Mukasey made that announcement today. It followed a Justice Department Inspector General's finding that the 2006 firings process was fundamentally flawed. The primary blame was laid on former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales, but no unlawful conduct was alleged. We'll have more on this story later in the program. 2 more Americans have died in Iraq and Afghanistan. A U.S. soldier was gunned down while on patrol in Baghdad today. Yesterday, an Afghan police officer opened fire on U.S. troops in Afghanistan, killing 1. The separate U.S. death tolls in September were the same, 23 in Iraq and in Afghanistan. And that's it for the news summary tonight. Now, down goes the rescue plan for now. Florida and the economy, politics in the firings of U.S. attorneys, and farewell, Paul Newman. That surprising defeat of the financial rescue plan. NewsHour congressional correspondent Kwame Holman begins our coverage.
The unexpected rejection came after the morning's cautious optimism that the bill would pass. As the no votes mounted, Wall Street underwent a drastic sell-off. And when the vote was declared final, leaders from both parties blamed each other, a sharp contrast to the bipartisan praise for the rescue plan when it was finalized over the weekend. House Republican leader John Boehner said a pre-vote speech by the Democrats' leader, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, drove away Republicans.
I do believe that we could have gotten there today had it not been for this partisan speech that the Speaker gave on the floor of the House. I mean, we've put everything we had into getting the votes to get there today. But the Speaker had to give a partisan voice that poisoned our conference, caused a number of members that we thought we could get to go south.
Pelosi's speech had reiterated her previous support for the bailout bill, but also criticized President Bush's legacy on fiscal matters.
$700 billion, a staggering number, but only a part of the cost of the failed Bush economic policies to our country. Policies that were built on budget recklessness. When President Bush took office, he inherited President Clinton's surpluses, 4 years in a row, budget surpluses, on a trajectory of $5.6 trillion in surplus. And with his reckless economic policies, within 2 years, he had turned that around. And now, 8 years later, the foundation of that fiscal irresponsibility, combined with an anything-goes economic policy, has taken us to where we are today.
Deputy Whip Eric Cantor was responsible for rounding up Republican votes.
Right here is the reason I believe why this vote failed. And this is Speaker Pelosi's speech that frankly struck the tone of partisanship that frankly was inappropriate in this discussion. There were several meetings day in and day out of members on both sides of the aisle trying to get up to speed on this issue of the economy and of the capital markets, and frankly, a lot of agreement.
In mid-afternoon, the Democratic leadership told their side of the story. Speaker Pelosi.
Today, when the legislation came to the floor, the Democratic side more than lived up to its side of the bargain. While the legislation may have failed, the crisis is still with us.
95 Democrats voted against the bill, while 133 Republicans voted no. The bill fell 13 votes short of passage.
We would have half the votes, and they would have half the votes, because we believe that this had to be bipartisan.
Chief Democratic negotiator and House Financial Services Chairman Barney Frank said Pelosi's speech should not have affected Republicans' commitment to the rescue.
But think about this. Somebody hurt my feelings, so I will punish the country. I mean, that's hardly plausible. And there were 12 Republican members who were ready to stand up for the economic interests of America, but not if anybody insulted them. I'll make an offer. Give me those 12 people's names, and I will go talk uncharacteristically nicely to them.
Majority Leader Steny Hoyer.
No Democrat that we could get to vote for the bill didn't vote for the bill. It was controversial on our side. This was not our administration's request. It was the Republican administration's request. But we tried to do everything in our power to meet the administration request. President Bush was on the television in the Rose Garden at 7:35 this morning.
That presidential statement came 2 hours before financial markets opened today, as the House was preparing to debate.
Now that this legislation has been agreed to by leaders of both parties, it must be passed by both houses of Congress. Now, I fully understand that this will be a difficult vote.
A week and a half of intense negotiation produced the version of the rescue that came to the floor. But the bill's supporters acknowledged it was distasteful to many members and their constituents.
Madam Speaker, rarely have the members had so many reasons for wishing we weren't here.
Financial Services Chairman Frank insisted the measure must pass.
This is a tough vote. This is a vote where many of us feel that the national interest requires us to do something, which is in many ways unpopular, because what we are talking about, to many of us, is the need to act to avoid something worse.
Even though a vote approving rules for debating the bailout was close, few thought it signaled the demise of the financial rescue, even as liberal Democrats and conservative Republicans lined up to criticize it.
Finally, question number 3. With only 3 months left of this current administration, why are we willing to even make available $700 billion to this administration? President Bush and Secretary Paulson have been wrong from the start on just about everything. If you think they'll be responsible with this money, think again.
Michigan's Thaddeus McCotter has led a chorus of Republicans who disdained the bill as a government giveaway.
And it was no mistake that during the 1917 Bolshevik Revolution, the slogan was peace, land, and bread. Today, you are being asked to choose between bread and freedom.
This is not
Texan Jeb Henserling heads the Republican Conservative Caucus. Republican Paul Brune of Georgia left little doubt about his feelings toward the bill.
This is a huge cow patty with a piece of marshmallow stuck in the middle of it, and I'm not going to eat that cow patty.
This afternoon, House leaders announced the chamber will reconvene on Thursday to try again on a financial bailout bill.
And to Margaret Warner.
After the markets closed, after one of the worst days in Wall Street history, the architect of the bailout plan, Treasury Secretary Henry Paulson, spoke to reporters outside the White House. He vowed to try again.
I will continue to work with congressional leaders to find a way forward to pass a comprehensive plan to stabilize our financial system and protect the American people by limiting the prospects of further deterioration in our economy. We've got much work to do, and this is much too important to simply let fail.
For a closer look at what happened on the Hill today, the reaction on Wall Street, and what's next, we turn to 4 reporters who are covering different parts of this story. Gene Cummings covers Washington political and financial matters for Politico.com. John Shaw covers Congress for Market News International, a global wire service that reports on financial markets. Krishna Guha is chief U.S. economics correspondent for the Financial Times. And Joe Nocera, we hope to be joined by, is a business columnist for the New York Times. He's also the editor of the paper's Executive Suite blog. Welcome to all of you. John, let's begin with you because you were in the chamber watching this unfold. What was it like?
It was a remarkable moment. I think going into the vote, there was a general view that the package would pass narrowly, but neither party was trusting the other. In fact, all eyes were up on the board, so there was a very careful calculation going on as to how many Democrats and how many Republicans were going to vote for it. And as the setup piece noted, there was the view by the Democratic leadership that they were willing to do some of the heavy lifting, but not all of it, and they were looking for about half the votes from the Republicans. And so that was a very intense focus for the Speaker.
But what could you see looking down as the vote started to go down?
Well, it was very interesting because it's hard to know really how each party does their whipping operations, getting votes, but the Democratic side was much more active. The Speaker was right in the middle of it. There were swarms of people around her. They were feeding her notes. She was carefully monitoring the vote. She was sending emissaries over to the Republican side. On the Republican side, and again, they may do it differently, but the minority leader, John Boehner, was pretty much alone. It didn't seem like many people wanted to talk to him. Roy Blunt, the whip, was pretty much standing off by himself. His deputy, Mr. Canner, was also pretty quiet. So visually, it looked like the Democrats were working harder. And at one point, Pelosi looked over and saw that not a lot of movement was going on that side. And she just said in a very loud voice, "We're finished," which signaled that she was done trying to get more Democrats to vote for the package.
And Gene, in fact, we only had 60% of the Democrats vote for it, 40% against, and only a third of the Republicans. That's a pretty wide repudiation. What do you think happened? What was behind this?
Well, I think we had a combination of things going on. We had ideology was a problem. This was totally against where some of the free market Republicans would ever want to be. We had politics at play here. Many of these no votes came from members who are in tight races, and they are really going to need the base to come out. And I was hearing that their calls were like 99% to 1. You know, it was the local community bankers who were saying, please do this because we're next. But otherwise, it was a very negative public response to this. And then, of course, we had some partisan petulance. I mean, it was sort of Washington at its worst. It was a really toxic mix.
Now, the question that people keep asking is, how could they have brought it to the floor without knowing they had the votes? What was the situation there? Did the Democratic leadership think it had the votes?
Well, frankly, if you listen to the comments from these leaders afterwards, they would have had a reason to think they had the votes, because John Boehner said he had the 12. He said he had the 12 and they went south on him, and they only needed 12 more to pass it.
Does your reporting suggest that's the case?
Well, I'm not sure if he really had the 12, but Nancy Pelosi was asked about this, and she said clearly if she had been told that was the number of Republicans who were going to vote for this, she would not have brought the bill to the floor.
The one sort of small irony is just moments before the House vote, there was actually a little bit of a squabble on the Senate floor in which the majority leader, Harry Reid, said the House will pass this momentarily, we'll vote on it Wednesday. And Mitch McConnell, the Republican leader, said, let's vote on it tonight. And there was a back and forth in which McConnell was saying, let's not wait till Wednesday, let's do it tonight. And then Pete Domenici, a veteran, stepped in and said, if this thing is out here too long, it might pass. You know, he was also urging an immediate vote. So the Senate leadership was very certain that they were going to be getting the bill this afternoon.
Now, Krishna Guha, the U.S. stock markets, the Dow was down 775 points or more. Is that an accurate reflection of how investors were feeling as they watched this unfold?
I think it is. I mean, the investors around the world, not just here in the U.S., are frankly terrified at the thought that this bill or something like it might not get passed. The stock market, of course, isn't the core of this problem. The core is in the credit markets and the money markets that have completely seized up in recent days, putting enormous stress on banks and other financial institutions. But investors in the stock market know that if the financial system gets into even more severe trouble, the whole economy will follow it.
Joe Nocera, I gather you've joined us.
I certainly have.
Great, I'm glad to see you. What was the mood on Wall Street today as you divined it?
Well, I mean, it was shock. People were stunned that it didn't pass. There had been an expectation that the fight was late last week and over the weekend as the House Republicans, put their foot down and said, we won't allow this to go forward in the way that it is currently conceived. So they spend the weekend working on it, and there was a total expectation on Wall Street that maybe this isn't going to solve the problems, but we got to get this thing done. So when it went down, just jaws were on the floor. And that's reflected in how much the market dropped just in the last 15 or 20 minutes of trading, when it went from about down 500 to about down 750.
And Krishna, back to you. The thing is that the markets were down even before the vote, and certainly the Asian and European markets had pretty much already closed and they were down. So does that suggest there's also a deeper lack of confidence even in this proposed solution?
Well, I think let's put it this way, there are deep, deep concerns about the state of the financial system globally. I mean, you saw 5 banks either nationalized or rescued in a government-sponsored takeover today on both sides of the Atlantic. 4 in Europe, 1 here in the US with the Wachovia City deal. The global financial system is under enormous stress. So that was panicking investors even before the news of the vote came through. But as you watch the votes to tally start to mount, you could watch the stock market tickers turn south. So there's no question that investors reacted very negatively to what happened in Congress today.
So John Shaw, back to you. What is it going to take to fix it? Paulson was over at the White House today. He was meeting with the president. You heard the Democratic leadership say, well, we're happy to work with the White House and the Republicans, but it's kind of up to the White House to take the lead here, and we hope they'll come up with something the Republicans like. So who moves next and in what direction?
It's hard to imagine how this passes without a lot more Republican votes. I think that's sort of the bottom line. And it's interesting because this is not really a dispute over even legislative language where sometimes you pull out a provision and you get 10 or 20 votes. This is a fundamental difference on a concept of whether the federal government should be coming in this heavy. And as Gene said, it's very heavily laden with politics. So I think there's going to be at least some slight change to the bill so people will, those who will end up voting for it, will have, be able to say that it had changed a little bit, but clearly they cannot do much to it. It's a very fragile compromise, and they really can't make a lot of big adjustments to it.
Do you agree, Gene, that you don't think this is going to trigger a basic rethinking of the whole premise of the bill?
No, I don't. I agree that if there's a fix, it's small. I mean, if Nancy Pelosi can apologize to 12 people, maybe she'll do that and try to grab the votes. But we should note the White House isn't alone here. The business community, the financial industry, they want this thing done. And they're going to apply pressure on Congress until it gets done. And this evening, the Chamber of Commerce had activated all of its members. The Business Roundtable was activating all of its members. And they have the greatest influence on the very Republicans who have held out. And so we will see a stepped-up effort by those communities to try to change this, because there could be other banks that go down tomorrow based on this. I mean, this did not ease the credit crunch that we've been talking about, and how many of those can happen? How many can Congress tolerate?
Briefly, John, is it the case that the House isn't coming back till Thursday now?
Right.
So, Joe Nocera, what happens? I mean, the markets aren't closed for the next 2 days. What do you think is going to happen in the meantime?
Well, nothing good. I mean, it's shocking. I mean, let's just be clear here. It is shocking, even with an election this close, that Congress is not willing to exercise some leadership, and it gets broken down into partisan baloney. I'm sorry to say it like that. So, people are going to wake up tomorrow and go to work in the markets and worry that there'll be another bank failure, that there'll be another drop in the stock market, that the credit markets will continue to crater. I mean, the system just can't take that much more, and that's where we are.
And Krishna, though, if you if you listen to the members and they talk about at least the calls and emails they're getting, and maybe it's just because the opponents are more exercised than those who reluctantly support it, but it doesn't look like tinkering around the edges of this bill is going to change how the public feels about it. As you said, that it will take really more of a crunch on the credit markets where people feel it. How far away are we from that, where everyday people really start feeling it?
Well, we may not be that far away. I mean, in some respects, we've already felt the credit crunch over the past year, but there's no question that what we're looking at now is a really severe intensification of this credit crunch if the financial system remains as dysfunctional as it is today. In terms of how this affects the political calculus, let's see. I mean, we've had a massive drop in the stock market today, and the general public seems to pay more attention to what's happening to stocks because they understand that better than what's happening in some of these complex credit markets. So it's possible, at least, that the scare today could, if you like, bring out a silent majority that doesn't like having to do this one bit, but sees that perhaps it's better than the alternative of not doing anything at all.
And Joe, there's no real measure of the credit markets, is there? I mean, that you can look at and say the Dow was up or down.
Well, I mean, there are measures, but they're complicated. So one important measure is the widening of credit default spreads. And that sounds ridiculously complex, and it is, but the wider the spreads are, that means how much people are willing to pay for this kind of insurance. The more the market is saying that the firm that they're buying the swaps against is going to default. It's a signal of lack of confidence.
But how does that affect mom and pop or the voters?
Well, I mean, it affects them because of, how many banks are going to go out of business. And then once the banks go out of business and other banks won't loan money to each other, and then it becomes difficult to get a mortgage, credit card rates go up. I mean, it affects daily life. And it already is starting to trickle down to companies, and it affects employment, because if they can't get loans to expand and grow and so on, people lose their jobs.
So, John, Jim Moran, a congressman from Virginia, said today on the floor, was quoted as saying, maybe the pain's going to just have to get really bad before these votes turn around. Do you think it will take that, or do you think there's some fix that can be done here?
I think a possible way to get this moving is to make a slight change and then have the Senate take it up first. I think there's a much stronger vote there, much more bipartisanship, and actually the Senate Republican leader, Mitch McConnell, at a late afternoon press conference, clearly left the door open that the Senate might go first. A strong bipartisan vote might change the dynamic and kick it over to the House and get a little bit of momentum there.
But if the issue, Jean, is re-election fears on the part of especially these House members, how do you get around that?
Well, it is a problem, and you've got it in the Senate too. And so I talked with some aides to Senator Reid this evening, and they may not go first for that very reason. Why would a senator risk taking this kind of vote on such an unpopular measure and then have the House just kill it again? So I wouldn't be surprised to see the Senate hold until the House finally does get the job done.
And Krishna, tonight Hank Paulson said he and the Fed would be working, meanwhile, continue to work on a case-by-case basis, as they have been, to try to contain the damage. But he said, our toolkit is substantial but insufficient. Is he absolutely right about that?
Oh, you bet he is. I mean, look, so far the government has had to resort to a series of ad hoc firefighting measures to desperately try to contain crises at one financial institution after the other. It's going to have to do some more of that in all likelihood. But what Paulson's desperate to do is to pivot to a more systematic approach that gets at the underlying causes of this financial stress. He knows that if he can't, he's going to have to deal with more and more individual failures in the months ahead.
All right, Krishna Guha, Joe Nocera, Jean Cummings, and John Shaw, thank you all.
Thank you.
Next, today's developments on the firing of 9 U.S. attorneys. Ray Suarez has that story.
And for more on that, we're joined by Ari Shapiro, who has been covering the story today for National Public Radio. Well, That big report landed on Washington's desk today. What is it?
It's almost 400 pages looking back at this 18-month fiasco. It's basically a chronicle of one of the worst times in the Justice Department's history, examining in detail why each of these 9 U.S. attorneys was fired, who made the decisions, whether the justifications were in fact the justifications that people publicly gave to Congress and other investigators. And it just reads like an indictment of everybody who was in charge at the Justice Department during that period of time.
There's a new Attorney General at the Justice Department, or a successor Attorney General in charge. What was his reaction, Michael Mukasey's reaction, to what was in this report?
The most significant thing he did today was to accept the #1 recommendation of the report, and that recommendation was to appoint a special prosecutor who would look into the allegations that the Inspector General and the Office of Professional Responsibility, who conducted this inquiry, were unable to get to the bottom of. The investigators in this report did not have cooperation from the White House. They did not have cooperation from some key members of Congress. And so at the end of this massive report, they say, you know, we've laid out everything we can here, but it's not everything there is to know. We can't reach a final conclusion on whether crimes were committed, so they recommended that a special prosecutor be appointed, and Mukasey chose a woman from Connecticut, Nora Dennehy, and she's going to be looking into this going forward.
Does a special prosecutor have the power to ask for things from the very people who wouldn't talk to the investigators who prepared this report? Karl Rove, Harriet Miers, the former presidential counsel, and Attorney General Gonzalez himself?
Prosecutors have the authority to ask for those things, but it's a very different context from the Inspector General's inquiry, which was always predicated on the notion that whatever they found out was going to be made public. When a prosecutor convenes a grand jury and calls witnesses in front of the grand jury and those witnesses testify, typically everything that happens there is secret. And unless anybody is indicted, the public may never know what happens before a grand jury. And so as a prosecutor goes forward with this investigation, she may be able to compel Harriet Miers and Karl Rove and others to testify. But if it's grand jury testimony, we may never know what is said unless somebody gets indicted at the end of this. Of course, people still have their right to not testify against them, the right against self-incrimination, taking the Fifth. And some of them may do that, but otherwise prosecutors can compel testimony from whomever.
The firing of the federal prosecutors in question became the subject of highly contentious hearings on Capitol Hill. But did one prosecutor more than any other in these several firings sort of attract the attention of the people preparing the report?
Yeah, the investigators come to the conclusion that the case of David Iglesias, who was the U.S. Attorney in New Mexico, was the most problematic of the 9 that they looked into. And when I say problematic, what I mean is they concluded that it looks likely, that they said there is substantial evidence to indicate that Iglesias was fired for improper partisan political reasons. The way U.S. attorney appointments work is you can fire them for a good reason, you can fire them for no reason, but you can't fire them for a bad reason. And the evidence suggests in this report that Iglesias was fired because he refused to indict Democrats before Election Day. Pete Domenici, who's the Republican senator from New Mexico, had complained to Iglesias about this. When Iglesias didn't indict those Democrats and didn't respond to Domenici's complaints, Domenici went to the White House, he went to Alberto Gonzales, and then Iglesias was fired. So the question is, was Iglesias fired because he wouldn't prosecute Democrats before the election? If so, there's a potential obstruction of justice charge in there. But as I said, the investigators were unable to reach that conclusion, and so that's one thing the prosecutor will be looking into going forward.
The investigators weren't able to talk to Pete Domenici either, were they?
That's right. He refused to talk. Harriet Miers and Karl Rove, both of whom were involved in this process, refused to talk. And so, you know, the Inspector General was really frustrated by this. In fact, they tell one story in this report about the White House creating a timeline of the U.S. attorney firings. The White House shared that timeline with one of the offices in the Justice Department, called the Office of Legal Counsel. And then when the investigators went and asked the Office of Legal Counsel for this timeline, the White House instructed the Office of Legal Counsel not to share the timeline with the investigators. So today in Congress, we had some Democratic senators saying, where was Attorney General Michael Mukasey during all of this? The Democratic senator from Rhode Island, Sheldon Whitehouse, said, when Attorney General Mukasey heard that the White House was telling the Office of Legal Counsel not to cooperate with this, why didn't Mukasey go to the White House and say, if you don't cooperate with this investigation, I'm no longer your Attorney General? So there was some criticism for the Attorney General, even as people applauded him for appointing this prosecutor.
of all the personalities involved in this report, it looks like former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales himself came in for some very rough treatment.
It is a blistering criticism of Gonzales. I mean, as I said, everybody at the top of the Justice Department comes in for harsh criticism. But this report again and again says Gonzales was not able to recall what happened, that he gave false and misleading statements to Congress, that he had poor judgment, that he was just absent from this process. And, you know, his lawyer today told me they're gratified that this report did not find any criminal wrongdoing on Gonzales's part. But the fact is the report did not conclude that Gonzales didn't break any laws. The report said we can't reach that conclusion because we don't have all the answers.
Do they ever come right out and say that they don't believe what he told them about the events that took place?
They never say that he lied, but there's one passage in here where they sound very dubious, and they say, the exact quote escapes me, but it's something like the number of times that he was unable to recall and the extent of his uninvolvement in this seems hard to believe. That may not have been the exact words, but that's the direction in which they go.
Does the fact that Michael Mukasey has gone this next step and appointed a career prosecutor to investigate this mean that the Justice Department has concluded that there may have been criminal wrongdoing involved with these firings?
Well, I hate to get picky, but it depends on what you mean by there may have been criminal wrongdoing. I think from the very beginning, there were accusations that there may have been criminal wrongdoing. The Justice Department is now conducting a criminal inquiry to see whether there was, in fact, criminal wrongdoing, whether they can indict someone and accuse someone of breaking a law. And those laws could be obstruction of justice, it could be perjury, it could be false statements under oath to Congress. So that's now in the hands of the prosecutor.
And the prosecutor herself, Ms. Dennehy, has to report back to the Attorney General while the Bush administration is still in office, correct?
That's right. Attorney General Mukasey instructed her to report back 60 days from now. And he didn't make clear whether that's going to be a public report or whether he'll keep it private. My sense of this is there is so much interest in this from Congress, from the public, from the prosecutorial and legal community, that there's going to be a lot of pressure to make something public after 60 days, whether or not we know everything that she tells the Attorney General at the end of this.
And, Ari, almost a guarantee that this matter will have a life that extends into the term of the next president?
Absolutely. These are not the sorts of things that get resolved in 2 months. And so we can expect that this turmoil, this chaos that has roiled the Justice Department for years now, for at least the last 2 years, is going to continue on into the next administration, whoever that is. One former U.S. attorney who was not fired in this mess, but who served under President Bush, who I spoke with today, told me he thinks it's going to take years and years and many, many more attorneys general before all of the damage that was caused by this debacle is fixed.
Well, you've been covering this story all along, and you've been through the report. Was there something there that just didn't come out in the hearings that when you saw it, you said, wow, I didn't know that?
You know, there were impressions we got from the hearings that people were uninvolved, that people didn't necessarily look into the real reasons folks were being fired. But to see in this report that after examining tens of thousands of pages of documents, after conducting hundreds of hours of interviews, after talking with dozens and dozens of people, that they can definitively say no one made an effort to determine why any of these individuals was being replaced. That they can say nobody made an effort, not one person, to make sure there were no improper partisan political considerations. That was pretty stunning to me.
NPR's Ari Shapiro, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Now the next in our series on the presidential campaigns in battleground states. Judy Woodruff spent last week in Florida, already one of the most familiar of all battlegrounds, where, as elsewhere, the economy has been hurting. Tonight, in the first of three reports, Judy looks at how the economy could affect the way the state votes in November.
At Casa Vana, a new and noisy Cuban restaurant in South Miami, both Democratic and Republican diners sat raptly watching last Friday night's debate, straining to hear, especially when the candidates spoke about the country's financial crisis.
It has to have accountability and oversight. It has to have options for loans to failing businesses rather than the government taking over those loans.
We've got to make sure that none of that money is going to pad CEO bank accounts or to promote golden parachutes.
Afterwards, supporters of both men said what they heard bolstered their opinion going in.
I've really come supporting McCain and really, with what he has to say.
And what did you hear in the debate that reinforced that view?
Well, his views on enriching the economy by cutting taxes for businesses and trying to, spur growth through the businesses. It's really where I think it can lead to greater benefits for the economy.
I see in Obama some flexibility mind that can understand complex problems and adapt to what is going on and make, good common sense decisions and be pragmatic about problems.
No minds changed at Casavana that we could find, nor the next morning among tailgaters just before a University of Miami football game. But we did find anxiety.
I'll be honest with you, I am very unsure with this economy. I'm a finance major. Currently what's happening in the financial markets is very serious to me, and that is going to play into my decision. I'm graduating in May, so I look to be getting a job.
This year, Obama's making the Sunshine State a top priority. An independent pollster, Jim Kane, who teaches at the University of Florida, says the top issue for voters here is the economy.
We're one of 3 states that have been the hardest hit because of the housing crash. And that's truly what it is here. I wish you could drive around with me and see in the South Florida area how many empty buildings that have been sold and nobody's living in them, that 3/4 of which are foreclosure. And it's only going to get worse. The inventory of empty units in this county alone is incredible. It's thousands of units that are just nobody can do anything with them. And you can't give it away.
Miami has been called ground zero in the nation's housing crisis, and you can see some of the symptoms scarring the city's skyline. And the crisis has hit statewide. Florida ranks 3rd in the nation in foreclosures. University of Miami professor Andrea Hewson says residents at all income levels have been hurt, especially those at the lower end of the scale.
We have a huge service sector of minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage jobs because they support not only tourism but also some of the other industries here like healthcare. And for those people, especially those who are in homes or new home purchasers, for those people the downturn has obviously been very, very strong.
No place is that more clear than in Central Florida, which has seen an influx of young, new families in recent years.
You have to be on the phone every week with the banks and find out what the status is.
In Polk County, between Tampa and Orlando, realtor Tammy Graham used to match eager buyers up with $150,000 to $200,000 homes. But a little over a year ago, she began showing more homes like this one.
This is one of the many foreclosures or pre-foreclosures that I have on the market. It was previously owned by a single mom, and she got to the point where she really couldn't afford the mortgage anymore, so she's had to move out and move into an apartment.
Graham says hearing the stories of homeowners can be painful.
I'm dealing with people calling me and saying, I've lost my job, my rate is about to adjust, my mortgage payment is going to go up $400 a month, and I can't afford it as it is. And I've had people ask me, I'm having problems feeding my children, should I stop paying my mortgage? And that's a sad state of affairs.
It's a state of affairs that has led Polk Works to have one of the busiest offices in town. Job seekers come here to search databases for employment opportunities and to get help brushing up their resumes and preparing for interviews. One of them is Lori Phillips. Her job as a graphics artist at the local newspaper was outsourced, leaving her out of work after 29 years.
There's no graphic arts design jobs out there. If you want to stay in the career I'm in, I have to go to Tampa or Orlando. So the commute will be more, the gas will be more.
A registered Republican who says she'll probably vote Democratic this year, Phillips says dipping into her savings just to get by has changed her attitude about the presidential election.
I have to admit, I really never paid attention to any of the campaigns before. So this year I've been watching the Republicans and the Democrats. So it's going to make a big influence on me how the economy is, how I vote.
Experts on Florida's business sector say there are plenty of bright spots around the state, including in the center, in the stretch of land along I-4, the interstate that runs between Orlando and Tampa. Mark Howard is executive director of business magazine Florida Trend.
The whole I-4 corridor in between Orlando and Tampa has become somewhat of a high-tech oriented center. There's a lot of medical manufacturing in the northern part of Pinellas County. We have within Pinellas County what is now the largest investment bank in the country, Raymond James. There was just a release that came out this past week that for the fourth year in a row, Florida had export growth in tech to the tune of $1 billion a year in the past year.
But to the southeast, in the agriculture-dependent Tri-Cities area, also called the Glades, what was already economically depressed is now even more so. The city of Belle Glade likes to claim that its fortune lies in its soil. The locals call it Muck City, after the black earth in which the area's main crop, sugar, is grown. But much of this sugar cane will disappear after the state agreed to buy 300 square miles of farmland as part of a project aimed at restoring the Everglades. Towns that already show the signs of long-term economic blight are now bracing themselves for further job losses and economic dislocation. The former mayor of Pahokee, Florida, J.P. Sasser, works at a body shop and reports a number of people who rent property from him are behind with their payments.
They've either lost their job or a member of their family has lost their job. And the safety net, so to speak, too, is not there like it used to be. Used to, if you lost your job, you could go out and quickly find another one, and that's not the case. Also, the real thing that's hurting us here is we're really only about 40-45 minutes from the East Coast, West Palm Beach. That was great when gasoline was cheap. At $4 a gallon, it's costing people money to drive over to the coast and work when you're talking about very just above base labor rates. When you're only making $10, $12 an hour, $8 to $10, $12 an hour, you can't afford to drive, and that's where it's really hurting us.
Sasser says he was a lifelong Republican, but no longer.
I just don't see how anybody in their right mind would put another Republican in the White House.
He sees a huge voter turnout ahead, benefiting Barack Obama.
Even though everybody's saying he doesn't have any experience, look at all that experience that's in Washington now that got us where we are. And I think as the economy worsens on a daily basis, every time you open the paper in the morning, I think Wall Street's going to elect Obama president. I mean, he couldn't have asked for better timing.
If Obama is going to be advantaged, it hasn't shown up yet in the polls. More voters here do say Obama is better able to improve the economy, and by 3-1, voters say the economy is their main concern. But overall, Obama runs even or just behind John McCain.
I think people are still looking for which candidate is going to step up with something that they feel is a better approach or a better response to economic conditions. I don't think that there's so far that to whatever degree people of Florida believe that the current administration caused this, that they blame John McCain for it as well.
That they don't, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that they don't necessarily see John McCain as responsible for it.
If so, it's not because Obama hasn't tried to make the connection.
As difficult as change may be, and as risky as it may seem to, be hiring somebody new to help lead this country, that the biggest risk is doing the same things we've been doing over and over again and somehow expecting a different result. We can't afford 4 more years of the same policies that have gotten us in this mess.
McCain, meanwhile, is working just as hard to distance himself from the Bush administration and the housing and financial debacle.
2 years ago, I warned the administration and the Congress that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac needed to be fixed
And it turns out that the problem was even bigger. They waited too long. And now we have a housing crisis, 3 bailouts with taxpayers' money, and a financial crisis.
The candidates have 5 more weeks to make their case. Pollster Jim Kane thinks Obama has the edge.
What's happened in the last few days, in the last week, regarding Wall Street and the financial meltdown, that's only going to make it worse, and it's going to make the voters far more nervous. And that's going to drive more people to the polls, in my opinion. And at this point, I'd have to say, if I had to look at a crystal ball, I would have to say the Democrats will benefit from that more than the Republicans.
The McCain campaign and Florida Republicans, who have pulled off 2 wins in the last 2 elections, are working to make sure Kane's forecast never comes true.
Judy's next report is about new voters, registering them and getting them to the polls. On our website, Judy is taking questions in a live chat tomorrow from 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also explore our election map and find stories from local Florida television stations about the campaign. As always, just go to pbs.org and then scroll down to NewsHour reports. Finally tonight, a tribute to Paul Newman in a form of a scene with the actor who died of cancer on Friday. He made his screen debut in the 1954 film The Silver Chalice and went on to act in more than 65 movies, winning an Oscar in 1987 for The Color of Money. Here is Paul Newman in one of among many memorable performances. It's from his 1967 film Cool Hand Luke, with Newman as a prisoner who refuses to conform, a role that earned him a Best Actor nomination.
Hey, good job.
No. Oh, yes.
Why would a liberal Democrat like me vote for Gordon Smith? Because I've seen Gordon stand by his principles many times against his own party, supporting funding for women's health clinics and gay rights, opposing oil drilling in Alaska, and so important to me, he was one of the first Republicans to break with George Bush and his party to end this awful war. His integrity and honesty are good for Oregon.
I'm Gordon Smith, and I approve this ad.
Want to bring back the value of your home? Come to the Portland Fall Home and Garden Show and find the best home improvement ideas today that offer the biggest payback later. From simple weekend projects to expert remodeling advice, all the tools you need under one roof. Plus, do-it-yourself workshops to help you learn handy skills. And there's fun for the whole family at the new Harvest Festival, the Portland Fall Home and Garden Show. It's time to bring back the value of your home this Thursday through Sunday at the Expo Center.
Didn't think much about it at the time, but now to a man earlier this evening seen putting a 100-pound turtle in his car. Here's Steve Dunn with tonight's Circular File.
Stuck my neck out on that one, didn't I?
Oh.
In tonight's Circular File, let's go to New York City, where Judge Miriam Cedarbaum is standing up for the women. Here's the deal. An attorney filed a lawsuit complaining about ladies' nights at nightclubs, saying they discriminate against men. He said the clubs offer women free or discounted admission and drinks while the men pay a lot more. Well, the nightclubs fought back, arguing that male customers might actually benefit from ladies' nights because so many women attend. I didn't think about that part.
Sure.
Anyway, the judge tossed it out, so ladies' night continues.
Yeah, you think the guys look at this and go, oh, it's ladies' night? I'm not going to go now.
You're going to discriminate against me. See you tomorrow.
Just getting old.
Fisher Communications.
Wow, this is great. But the deal was you're supposed to make me breakfast this morning.
It's what you'd cook, if you cooked.
Funny.
McDonald's McSkillet burritos, skillet potatoes, scrambled eggs, cheese, sausage, and zesty salsa, all wrapped up to go.
This is the best breakfast you've ever made.
It's never a good deal if it's a product nobody wants. So Sleep Country put its most popular items on sale. But the bestseller sale is ending soon. Save on Sleep Country's best-selling Simmons Beauty Rest, the most popular Sealy Posturepedic, and top-selling Sleep Number bed. Not off-brands, not overstock items. Just the best deals on the best-selling models. But only for a short time. Guaranteed comfort, best selection, lowest price.
There's a great reason at Wilsonville Toyota that we mark our lowest price, our best price on every single car. It's to save you time and save you money. And we do both at Wilsonville Toyota.
I got like perfect car for the perfect price with the most amazing service ever.
My time is valuable. You should just be able to walk in, buy it, and get out.
And we didn't experience any out of the back pocket type thing. Oh, by the way.
It was the first place I came and the last place I came.
Why would a liberal Democrat like me vote for Gordon Smith? Because I've seen Gordon stand by his principles many times against his own party, supporting funding for women's health clinics and gay rights, opposing oil drilling in Alaska, and so important to me, he was one of the first Republicans to break with George Bush and his party to end this awful war. His integrity and honesty are good for Oregon.
I'm Gordon Smith, and I approve this ad.
Broadway's most talked about new musical is Spring Awakening, the winner of 8 Tony Awards, including Best Musical of the Year. The Post calls it a groundbreaking jolt of genius, and the Times calls it electrifying.
October 21st through 26th at Keller Auditorium. Welcome by Fred Meyer and K2.
There's never been a better time to switch and save with Hyundai. Switch your MPG from 14 to 33 and you'll save up to $200 a month just in gas. Switch and save with the 33 MPG Hyundai Accent and Hyundai Elantra. Switch to the 09 Sonata and save with better gas mileage than Accord and Camry. Switch to America's best warranty and save with 10-year, 100,000-mile protection. Switch right now and save up to $2,500 cash back on Hyundai sedans. Switch and save now at your Pacific Northwest Hyundai dealers. These offers end soon.
Tonight's K2 program brought to you by Sofas by Design.